We are excited to share the second half of our conversation. Again, it was a high honor having Brad on the show. Brad is a one-of-a-kind. He's a certified Wim Hof instructor. He's a former soldier. He was an officer in the Marine Corps. He's a strength and conditioning coach, a certified yoga teacher, certified nutrition coach as well. Truly, this man has a load of experience and lots of pragmatic takeaways as to ways that we can level up our health and be the strongest versions of ourselves as we lean into these uncertain times. And it was amazing connecting with Brad, and I learned so much from our conversation. And it's an honor for me to share this with y'all. And hopefully there can be some strong takeaways about ways to use these practices and to ultimately be healthier, happier, and stronger for ourselves, our loved ones, and our circles of influence. Thank you so much for listening. Without further ado, I give you the second half of my conversation with Brad Carson. Thank you so much for listening.
Welcome to the Worth the Fight podcast, where we bring you powerful conversations surrounding the sensible and therapeutic use of psychedelics and plant medicines towards healing trauma. I'll introduce you to guests who, through their own personal journey and transformation, tell the Worth the Fight story. I'm your host, Matt Simpson, author of Worth the Fight, Acting for a Better World, a guide to spirituality, psychedelic medicines, and overcoming trauma. Thank you for listening.
Everything that's going on and with where we kind of stand now in terms of our healthcare system and just starting to provide alternative means of therapy for people, I think we're heading in the right direction. So I think that there are numerous groups of people who are dealing with trauma that hasn't been addressed. And I think whether you're using, therapy or meditation or, holotropic breathing or, a psychedelic session, I think what that can provide is a way to get out of your own way, if that makes sense, or a way to, kind of quiet that, the ego mind and really get to a root of an issue. I remember for me personally, I was doing a, Wim Hof method breathing session, more of not the traditional rounds of breathing, but there's also almost like a 2.0 version of it where it's like a power breathing where it's a lot more intense and you can get, visuals and have these, psychedelic-like experiences. And I remember when I was going through, one of these sessions where all of a sudden I'm just crying and I'm crying and I'm crying. And I remember just saying over and over again, like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And at first I was like, who am I sorry to? I'm literally on my couch right now, like by myself. And what I realized, after, thinking about it and kind of mulling it over was that I felt responsible as an officer that I couldn't do my job to protect, the Marines who, again, weren't even in my unit, but all, different guys who were, sacrificing their life. I felt responsible because I'm an officer and here's this Marine, like, it should have been me or whatever it may be. And so for me, that was a huge therapeutic release. And I think something like, an ayahuasca session or, a psilocybin session in a controlled setting can provide that, just the small measure of letting that person get out of their own damn way so that they can heal. And to me, it's, it's the whole, the mountains that you're carrying, you're only supposed to climb. And once you can process that, I think you can have this, emotional therapeutic release of, I don't need to carry this anymore. But the problem is with, processing trauma is it's very, very difficult. And most people don't want to look at it because they're either, afraid to cry or yell or scream. It's like, I've done all of those things. I had to. And if you look at another thing that I usually reference when I do my workshops is it's called the Polyvagal theory by Dr. Stephen Porges. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
No.
So the general gist of where I'm going with this. So it's basically an expansion upon typical fight or flight, rest and digest. There's an additional stage at the top where it's the freeze mode, where basically if you get to this place where you're so traumatized that you can't fight back and you can't yell and you can't scream, it's like the deer in headlight mode. And so basically saying, once you hit that moment and people are saying, just relax or calm down, or, go to the gym or get out, or find some way to, return back to your kind of rest and digest, happy place. Dr. Porges does is he looks at what's called the deactivation stage. And so if you're in this, hypervigilant state of the freeze, you can't just jump back into rest and digest. You have to go back down through the fight or flight area. So how do you do that? It could be, it could be crying, or it could be yelling or screaming. It could be, punching a punching bag or a pillow, or it could be, doing therapeutic writing. It could be, just getting all your thoughts out, because what I say, to me, it's better to have your emotions like out on paper or out, hitting into a punching bag than have those things still, ruminating and stewing in your head. If you don't, work through that, then it's just going to, eventually build up to the place where you're either going to explode, or you won't be able to deal with it. And so I think, all of these alternative forms of therapy, whether it be, psychedelics, or whether it be, I've seen veterans who have had, amazing reactions to, working with animals and working with horses.
Yes.
I work with a therapeutic equestrian group. And if you think about, these amazing creatures that are, 1,200 pounds, and it's like they could crush you if they wanted to, but then you realize that they're the most gentle creatures, and they read off your emotions. Horses don't respond to language. Very few horses even really know their name, but what they'll do is they'll read your body language, and they'll read, if you are stressed, then the horse is going to be on edge. But if you can calm down, then the horse, realizes that you're calm and realizes that you're in a good place. So that can be a teaching tool. So I think that, the fact that we're putting out different resources is fantastic. And I think that there are so many types of trauma that people are dealing with. Obviously, I haven't read your whole book, but I've, read, a good portion of it. And I understand not everything, but, I've read what you went through. And I think there are a lot of people who have this, trauma that they've just kind of swept under the rug, and they think that, I don't want to deal with this. And what happens, like I said, is, eventually that builds up. And to me, it's, it's finding a constructive way where you can deal with and learn how to process your trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a challenge in the world that we're living. I think it's getting easier and easier. And the idea that there's just so many different tools that we can deploy to address our trauma. We're shifting the conversation around male vulnerability. So people are even opening their mouths and talking about this as well. Brene Brown's work is something that has resonated with massive audiences.
Yeah.
And,
I read her book too.
Oh, so good. So good.
Yeah.
There's another one, Mark Manson, and The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yep, read that one too.
Profound. He's got that book, Models, How to Attract Women Through Honesty, which is one of the most enlightened program, whether you're a man or woman, that really decodes our misconnecting that we do very well as a people. And I've really enjoyed his high vibe way of looking at the world. And so I fancy you as a biohacker who has tried and another biohacker, because that's something that I've really enjoyed playing around with all these different tools that we have to deploy to be healthier, happier, and stronger for ourselves and our loved ones. We talked a little bit on the pre-call about, and this is something we haven't gotten into yet on the podcast, but the idea of microdosing psychedelics. We think we've talked a little bit about that on past episodes, but the notion of that being such a I have it at various times in the last 3 to 4 years, and the idea of it being nootropic and with a very, very low risk profile, and augmenting, elevating my well-being, maybe 5 to 10%, something subtle, but enough that I think that there's something there. I know the science is limited, but I wanted to see if you've had experience with microdosing psychedelics, and if you could speak to any benefits that you found and how that's worked for you.
Sure. So I have experimented with microdosing psilocybin specifically. And For me, it had, great benefits. The way I look at it is, obviously with the, Big Pharma and all the stuff that they're putting out there, there's an issue going on with, the number of people that are taking, antidepressant medication or anti-anxiety medication. Last I checked, looking at, CDC numbers, it's as high as, 1 in 5 people in the United States are currently prescribed and taking some kind of antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication. That's alarming to me.
Very.
And I think that the way I look at it is you can either take a natural source of something, or you can take a synthetic and man-made version of something. So to use the analogy of, of food or nutrition, you could eat cane sugar and, have whatever drink that has, lemonade, where you make it home and it has cane sugar in it and you squeeze your own lemons. And that's a relatively healthy option. Obviously, sugar is, an energy source for the body. And if you're using a natural source like cane sugar, your body knows what that is. Versus if you were to get some, aspartame artificially sweetened with all of these, preservatives and, food coloring and all that stuff in it, you're still drinking lemonade, sure. But at the same time, there are so many substances in that aren't natural for the body. So your body doesn't really know how to deal with that. So what happens is your body will, in your gut, build up an immune system response, create inflammation because you're dealing with a foreign invader, a foreign substance in your body. I look at using something like psilocybin or microdosing as, a more natural SSRI or more natural anti-anxiety or antidepressant medication. If you look at the actual chemical compounds, which again, this is something I've done and I've studied, I think a lot of people, when this idea or this topic is brought up, they're saying, well, this is an illegal substance, you can't do that. It's like, okay, well, let's look at the actual chemical compounds and what you're putting into your body. So for example, DMT is a naturally occurring substance. It's endogenous, meaning your body naturally produces it. We know that. And if you look at the chemical compounds for things like dopamine and serotonin, and then you look at the chemical compounds of DMT and things like psilocybin or even LSD, they're very, very similar. They're, one molecule chain off. I don't have the molecules right in front of me. But again, I've looked at all these different things and said, okay, this is a much more natural, key and receptor source. So how your brain works, it has, different receptor sites and then molecules that'll then bind into it. And so to me, if you can get something that's a more natural source, like coming from, a mushroom or a plant, that is a healthy, natural option that people, can use and can need. And I think it can provide, potentially a great amount of, help for people. The problem, like you said, is we don't have a lot of research on it. Rick Strassman did some, research. I want to say it was Arizona, when they started doing injections with DMT, and they've done different studies with, things like MDMA or LSD or psilocybin, in, clinical research trials. The problem is that they don't have enough of those studies. Big Pharma and different companies are, quick to, put out the next drug or the next anti-anxiety medication because they can profit from that. But the problem with dealing with anything from a natural source, like psilocybin, because it's, a mushroom or a fungi, or, even, marijuana with, dealing with, the impacts of medical marijuana, is you can't trademark something if you can't like change the substance. So meaning a pill or any kind of, pharmaceutical, they can trademark it and then they can sell it for, a ridiculous amount and a ridiculous price. Versus you can't trademark, a banana, or you can't trademark, a mushroom or, a marijuana leaf. It's a natural growing thing. So the profit margins are much lower. And so, companies are likely to lose if, once more research is done. Big Pharma and a lot of, pharmaceutical companies would likely lose out on a significant portion of their incomes because you can't make money off those things. So that's why, unfortunately, I think a lot of the research is, not being done for that exact reason. And that to me is a little unfortunate, but, you can only kind of keep down, a well-kept secret for long enough. I think, there's a reason why government officials and Silicon Valley CEOs and all these, people who are in the know are doing things like microdosing or going to, Burning Man and having a psychedelic experience. Even looking at, someone like Steve Jobs, who spoke openly about, his creativity being spurred by, using different, psychedelic drugs. It's like, okay. Or even, anyone who likes music or is a fan of, the Doors or the Beatles or Jimi Hendrix or, name a million other musicians or movie, directors. And it's like, they've had these experiences and that has benefited them in a positive way. All that being said, I think people need to obviously tread lightly. I don't think that these substances and these, means are for everyone. But at the same time, I think if there were, controlled settings and where people went to, hospital facility or had, an ayahuasca session or whatever it may be with a doctor there or with, a medical professional who can then, guide them through the process. And not only that, but, have a counseling or a therapy session immediately after and being able to help someone through that process. I think there's enough research out there to prove that these things work. There needs to be more, and it needs to be, better spread. And I think we do need more information about it. And I think not looking into it is, only, being detrimental and not accepting the credible scientific information that's already out there.
Beautifully said. So much goodness there. All of that resonates big time. The notion of, and I know that we were talking microdosing, but the idea of, and I think a central point of why I feel a moral duty and obligation to just raise my hand and share is like the problem with, and all this can be boiled down to the problem with the psychedelics is they work and no one makes money. There, I said it.
Yeah.
And
sure.
but it's these are interventions that can knock out in a long weekend the psilocybin, the MDMA, the ibogaine, ayahuasca, the peak experiences, the LSD, which is studied a lot less now and has the cultural baggage but the idea that 10 to 20 years, or my personal experience with ayahuasca is that first experience was 10 to 20 years of therapy in a long weekend, 90% of my addictive tendencies gone, snapped my fingers, poof, gone, and allowing me to be able to live a healthier, happier, and stronger life for myself, again, for my loved ones, and for my circle of influence, and to find a more meaningful life of service.
To add on to that too, I also think that the same types of experience can be achieved through, breathing exercises and breath work. And a lot of people hear that and they're like, well, I don't know, it's like, well, okay, come to Poland or, come hang out with us for, a week and do a retreat with Wim. And I just recently got back from Poland and it's such an amazing experience. And once you get into, using that breath work, the therapeutic benefits that I witnessed and, helped guide people through are just amazing. And I've had, people since who, were either in my group or just, people who I'd met out in Poland who have reached out, and there are, people who have said, I was addicted to whatever substance and now I'm not. And they've used that as a launching pad to, become the happiest and healthiest and strongest version of themselves. So I think, just to get back to, I think, using the breath work can open that same door to get to that place of, where I can work and process through trauma. I think, there are other means to open the same door. The reason why I'm a huge fan of, using the breath work is because, again, you have control over that situation. If I decide to, this all of a sudden it's getting, too weird and I don't like this anymore, I can return back to my normal breathing and then everything stops and everything goes back to normal. Versus if you're, an hour into an ayahuasca session, there's no getting off the train.
You got another 4 or 5 more hours and
you're there. Yeah. So, and that can be, horrifying for people. And I think, there is that potential with, psychedelics to have that, scary shaken to the core experience. And it's very, very real. And, even if it's, quote unquote, not real because it's in your head, well, yeah, try telling that to someone who's, in the middle of an experience. It feels real. It feels like, I'm going to die, or I'm going to have a panic attack, or, it can be very, traumatic and scary. And so I think, using a more natural method, I mean, to me, I like, the easiest way. And not only that, but, the one that's going to have, the least adverse side effects. And so, if anyone is listening and, considering, trying something like, psychedelics or whatever it may be, I really, err on the side of caution and urge people to, do so in, a controlled environment with a medical professional. There are organizations out. I know you mentioned Jesse and the Heroic Hearts Foundation. That's another great resource for veterans, but I think people need to, tread lightly, because with that, I also think as a health coach, it would be irresponsible to brush over the fact that I don't think it's for everyone. I think that, sometimes it can give you or show you exactly what you need. The problem is, if you're an asshole, it's going to show you that you're an asshole, and you might not be ready to deal with that. And that could become, scary or traumatic. Versus if you go into it with a healthy intention, I think that's so important, whether you're doing a meditation session or whether you're doing, a psychedelic session. I think your intention and going into the experience with, a sense of humbleness and a sense of, I'm here to learn and I'm here to process, then you'll be fine.
Love that. Love you. Love the sentiment and love the caution. And that is, a very integral part of my messaging as well. Is hey, these aren't for everyone. This is not a panacea. These are my personal experiences. This is what worked for me with what I was going through. And, the idea that there are so many other tools to deploy. We have the Wim Hof method being a powerful, and there's other forms of breath work, but I think that Wim Hof has it's the most comprehensive method. And, with it also incorporates meditation. We haven't talked much about that, but I believe that meditation's the secret sauce. You can bypass all of this stuff that we're talking about and just adopt a healthy meditation practice, and you might be just fine.
Absolutely.
And but fasting is something that has been a notion that I've been shocked with how that has been. I do the intermittent fasting, and I also do occasionally I'll do a 3-day water fast or a 24 or 36 hour fast where I just won't eat a day. Especially after a few days, like last week I was in Chicago with friends and I was eating out a lot, and it just felt like a rebalancing. Hey, I'm going to take Saturday. I just drank coffee. And it was a wonderful experience to have that withdrawal, almost to balance a little bit of the overindulgence that I had when I was out of my normal routine. And I think that is another strategy that people can use that gets us to that altered state experience. Our digestive tract is shut down, and we're in this very clear, sensitive state of mind. And, that can be very profound. And the science that is being demonstrated that shows the autophagy, this essentially our good cells eating our shit cells, our bad cells, and how that affects our immunity, how that affects our digestion, how that affects our energy levels is got a lot of really astounding scientific long-term benefits, and is another idea for people to engage. Again, very low risk profile. If you're a day and a half into a 3-day water fast and you're feeling really on edge, like it doesn't feel safe, then go get a cheeseburger. It's like, that's cool. That's fine.
Exactly. That's a great point. That's another, thing that I use is fasting. So just to elaborate a little bit on what you mentioned. So I think it's important because I think this is a great tool, especially now with, growing health concerns and the coronavirus and all these things out there. So what happens if your body goes into a fasted state, exactly like, Matt, you just said, is what's called cell autophagy. So basically your body's pretty smart. So if you're in a fasted state, obviously your body will go into reserves, so fat stores or adipose tissue for your energy. So your body is so smart that if you're in a fasted state and you're starting to burn off, fat and use different cells in your body for energy, it uses the ones that are diseased, damaged, broken. It uses all of those first. So in a sense, it's like, your body cleaning itself out of all those diseased or damaged cells. And it's like it's a detox for your body. It's, the cleanest detox that you can use. And just with fasting, I think, you can get that benefit of, cell autophagy of, it's about 14 or 16 hours, which is relatively easy. If people ask me, how to start a fasting practice or, should I fast for a day? I say, okay, let's start with, depending on where you are. So if you're, used to eating all the time and you the longest break you've ever taken is 10 hours, then let's start with 12 hours and let's see how your body feels. And then maybe, if that seems okay, go up to 14 hours or 16 hours. And it's not something that you have to do every single day, but it can be a great, system reset. But I think that's a huge one just for, rebalancing out your system. With our society now, again, people are constantly taking in food and food and food and more food. And then your body has to break down all of that stuff. And when it's constantly doing that, then your body doesn't get a chance to, clean house and clear out all those diseased, damaged, or broken cells. So that, happens when you're in a fasted state. So that's a great point that you brought up.
Thank you for breaking down the science and for,
Sure.
for very clearly articulating, even more so, a mechanism behind that practice. And, really, really powerful. And, to incorporate that into our lives the best that we can. And the idea of leaning in and not having to go do a 10-day water fast
That'd be a bad idea.
in the mountains.
Even a 24-hour fast might be a really bad idea depending on where a person is currently health-wise. So that's important to really ease your way into any health program, and especially just as a disclaimer, as a health coach, if you're starting any kind of new program, it's wise to consult a doctor to say is this okay for me to do.
I was just thinking the same thing. Thank you for putting that disclaimer out there. This is not medical advice, y'all.
Exactly. Just again, I'm not a doctor. I'm working on becoming a doctor, but I'm not a doctor yet, and I tread lightly. So just please, if anyone is taking any of this advice, be smart about it. If you're going to change anything into your workout program or diet or anything, just be smart and consult the doctor first. Make sure you're healthy and safe to do so.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Sure.
I want to backpedal a little bit and go back to the microdosing.
Okay.
And it's something that have you heard of Paul Stamet? Of course you've heard of Paul Stamets.
Of course I've heard. I'm a big fan of his work with mushrooms. Yeah, he's the mushroom go-to guy. He is
the guy.
Yeah.
He is the guy indeed. And he's got a psilocybin lion's mane stack that he's been talking about for a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I've been hearing more and more people talk about. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes, and so many links in the show notes from all these wonderful resources and the things that we've talked about. These are going to be some jacked up in the most amazing way show notes with high vibe information for all of y'all. So please do think about checking out the show notes if you haven't before. But this stack is 5 days on, 2 days off, and
Mm-hmm.
it consists of a very low subperceptual dose of psilocybin. So almost I think a 20th to a 50th of a normal peak experience. So something very low that there's going to be no visuals. You're also taking lion's mane, which has got all sorts of cognitive benefits, and
Sure.
the idea of niacin being it's a, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a vitamin B that has a flushing effect, and the idea of this, all three of those going together. But Paul Stamets, I read some really profound, and again, I'm going to put a link to this article from the Third Wave podcast. They are a podcast that is solely devoted towards microdosing. And so they know their stuff. But the idea that Paul Stamets is just as excited about this stack as he is about the Stoned-Ape theory, the notion that that our hominid, great ape ancestors were taking psilocybin, eating these mushrooms that were growing off of dung of the animals that they were following to hunt, and that was attributed to a part of the rapid evolution of our species, and why we are the ones that dominate the planet right now, and that these powerful, and Joe Rogan, he talks a lot about this. He's a big proponent of this theory, and I mean, it makes sense to me. But the idea that Paul Stamets is just as excited about this stack because of the niacin takes the flushing element of the niacin, delivers the psilocybin outside, and the lion's mane outside of our central nervous system, and not really astute to the and if I'm saying it correctly, and I'll put the article out, but I've just been hearing wonderful things. It's a nootropic. It elevates your creativity, elevates your mood, well-being, and might be a tool, a very low risk tool that might be of use to people that are looking to potentially dabble. Yeah, I was wondering, have you heard of that?
So I have heard of, I'm very familiar with Paul Stamets and his work. I have loosely heard of, the lion's mane and the incorporating other things into it. I haven't personally tried that. So I really can't speak too much to, the effectiveness of that stack. I will say that, with microdosing, I think that it just can put a person into more of a flow state. I think a lot of the times for people, one of their biggest issue is just getting out of your own damn way. I think the ego, or the critical, thinking, decision-making mind is so active that essentially it starts to interfere with your day. To quote some other stuff, so what happens during a meditative state or a flow state is what's called transient hypofrontality, meaning, so I'll break that down. So transient, short-term, hypo meaning lower, and then frontality meaning your prefrontal cortex, so that front area of your brain. What happens in these states, either using a psychedelic or going into a deep meditative state or a flow state, is your critical decision-making prefrontal cortex gets shut down considerably. And what happens when you start to do that is your brain is still using all that same amount of blood flow. So your brain is about, give or take 2 pounds, and it requires about 25% of your daily caloric expenditure. So meaning it's using up all your calories. So that's why if you have a stressful, mentally stressful day, you're exhausted at the end of it. So what happens is when you shut off your decision-making mind, that prefrontal cortex, you can start to redirect your blood flow. And this is exactly what happens with the Wim Hof method too, as you can start to redirect that blood flow into more primitive areas of your brain. So the brainstem, the insular cortex, that type of area. And those are the areas which, secrete and produce things like, so the area specifically is called the periaeroductal gray area of your brain. And what that can do is start to secrete endogenous, so endocannabinoids, and things like, endogenous opiates. So your painkillers and your feel-good medicines in your brain, once you start to get out of your thinking, make your decision, thinking brain, that gets redirected into the areas that just make you feel good. And so, doing something like microdosing can just be, a way to, again, get out of your own damn way. I think people, overthink or, overanalyze a situation, and, that can be a way to, allow yourself to just be more present, be more in the moment. I think those are, some of the greatest takeaways that I personally experienced, is just being more present, being more grounded, being more mindful. It's not something that I do, regularly, but at the same time, I think the greatest impact of, using any kind of, substance is to, use it once or use it twice, and then just carry on the benefit from it. But yeah, I think microdosing can be, a great benefit to people who, don't want that full-blown vision psychedelic experience, where you can still feel, more grounded, more connected, without any of the, intense visuals or the more, I don't like to use the word scary, but, could be, intimidating portions of these, plant medicines for people.
Love this breakdown and and how these experiences have led to more flow in your life. And we've talked on previous episodes, with flow, there's incredible scientific research that is, or flow research, scientific research that is showing, elevated creativity, elevated learning, elevated productivity. And that's why, I believe these psychedelic medicines and meditative states and flow states are very disruptive. Those are, there's some
Yeah.
big numbers and this is why we have to tread with caution.
Yeah.
And we're out towards the edges with these conversations and with these compounds and like they say in Stealing Fire, it's better to start slow than skid out and turn one. So don't be a dumbass. Do your research and be responsible. And I think that a big aspect of when we come in with that, you'd mentioned earlier, that humility and focusing towards healing so we can be of greater service to our human family. I think that's when the magic can really happen with these, with meditation, with psychedelic medicines, with flow states. When we transcend ourself and point our energies in the direction of service. Lord knows there's enough people that are hurting and struggling, and we might be in the midst of, we're already struggling as a people, and we're leaning into some potentially dark times with what's going on with the uncertainty of the coronavirus, and all of these are different tools and strategies and ideas that open us up so we can be healthier, happier, and stronger for our loved ones. So thank you so much for helping to break down all of the mechanism and the really what we're dealing with here. And I'd love to talk a little bit about your coaching and have you share your work. If anybody wants to work with you, I think you bring so much to the table, and the idea that you do the life coaching and you can help people level up their game to be healthier, happier, and stronger. Can you tell us a little bit about your coaching?
Sure. So it's funny because actually just a year ago I started my business. Carson Coaching is my professional business. So that incorporates a lot of different things, but to me it's more about optimizing your life in order to become the best version of yourself. And so it incorporates so many different areas, but I really like to meet people, where they currently are. And so, it's really personalized training in terms of, getting into, setting goals for yourself to maybe you want to get your nutrition in check, or maybe you want to, how to learn how to take better care of your body or improve your sleep. I use so many different techniques from, biohacking to the Wim Hof method to, anything and everything that I've learned. It's kind of this, comprehensive program from, Marine Corps training to yoga to, literally anything and everything. I also work with a variety of other groups, the VA being another one of them, working with veterans, kind of helping, them deal with a holistic healthcare program. And again, it's, I'll work with anybody who wants to work with me. My schedule is pretty busy. I'm still in school now. I'm finishing my third degree actually in behavioral science, but it's just been great. It's been a wild ride, and being able to work with Wim and branch out and just work with a lot of other people. So the one other main front that I'm working on as well, just kind of throw that out there, is I'm working on finishing my first book. The title of it is Brain Cell, basically brain with an apostrophe S. So learning how to get out of your own head. So the first half is kind of my backstory, everything that happened to me and how I got out of it. And then the second half is more, biohacking and how do you take control of your life? How do you, improve your diet or improve your relationships, improve your health and your, all the different things that impact it. So the estimated completion date for that is the end of this year. So December 31st, 2020, that's going to be out through my website. And I really encourage people to, if this helps, if this resonates with you, please reach out to me. You can find me on, the regular sources, social media, or my website is www.ltbradcarson.com. So Lieutenant Brad Carson. And I'm really more active on, things like Instagram and Facebook and whatnot. Instagram is at Limitless Brad, if anyone's out there. But the other thing that I'm also doing in light of all this coronavirus stuff is, putting out a ton of free content out there, especially as a health coach. I'm sympathetic to the situation that's going on. And, obviously people may be and will be affected financially if, restaurants and, transportation, all these things are closing down. People are, their paycheck's going to be impacted. So I'm trying to really put out as much free content as I can to, learn how to take care of yourself, learn how to dial in your diet and, take care of all these different things. So there's a ton of free content that I put out there as much as I can. I mean, I'm posting online every single day. And if not, then if you want more, then you can always, work with me on a one-on-one or a group-based setting. I offer, workshops and retreats, do WimHof Method retreats. And yeah, it's been overwhelming, but, I'm just riding the wave of whatever opportunity comes up, I'm just kind of going with, the next thing. But again, my main goal is just trying to help people. I think once you understand that you've been in a place that's, difficult, or, you've been through some things, I think if you know how to overcome something, even if you, like, say you've lost weight and you can help someone else who's in that same situation now, I think, our greatest obstacles can become our greatest strengths if we really look at, what we did and how we overcame these things. And I think, being vulnerable is a huge part of that. Just saying your story. I mean, my life has been ugly at times. It's been, sad at times, but it's been beautiful and amazing at times too. And I'm just trying to focus on that and really, inspire others to do the same.
Well, I'm super inspired, and thank you so much for sharing your gifts and for, your commitment to being the best version of yourself, and not just having it be about yourself, but sharing and shining for our human family. And I really am wowed and proud of all of your outlooks and perspectives that are that will offer extreme value to anybody that might want to work with you on a one-on-one basis, or to connect with you. And your expression is in itself is a great gift and offering to our human family. So thank you for being you, and for your openness to have this two-part, the first Worth the Fight podcast, two-part podcast conversation. And when we had our pre-call yesterday, we both had a feeling that we could really let this rip and talk on so many different notions. And these past two episodes have been just loaded with useful, high vibe, actionable content. That and this notion of actionable is something that's very alive for me. As I think we've reached a time where the abstract, the woo-woo, it doesn't fit the times that we're in right now. We need action. We need people getting off the sidelines and grabbing a shovel and pitching in however which way they can, and none of this woo-woo bullshit I think that often people get lost in that on the spiritual path. So thank you for your strong expression and for leading by example. Are there any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to present for anybody that might be considering coming on the altered states path, or the path of meditation, psychedelics, really an accelerated growth path? Any high vibe wisdom that you can offer?
Sure. I think it's funny because the first thing that popped into my head is usually what I go with. And I remember listening to the old recordings of Earl Nightingale talking about how when law of attraction and all this stuff kind of first came out. And the question that was asked in the beginning of that was, what's wrong with the world, or what's wrong with men? And he said his answer after he thought about it, and he said, the big thing that's wrong is that most men simply don't think. And that resonated so much with me, because it's true. And it really opened my eyes to say, okay, I need more time to think and to reassess and to look at things that I'm doing well, and to look at maybe things that don't work. And I think a lot of the times, something happens in someone's life and you can look at it as, I failed at this, or you can look at it as this is a learning and a growth experience. And I think having this constant process where you make time every single day, which is what I do, with the Wim Hof method and my breathing exercises and my daily meditation practice. I think taking time to think is huge. And I think in our society, that's something that, quickly gets cut out when people say, oh, I don't have enough time. But I really want to, reiterate to people that, whatever you're going through now is temporary. I think we all have struggles. And if you define yourself by your struggles, you're going to be living in the past. And if you can define yourself as, okay, this is what I've gone through, but I can look at my struggles as something that can make my story that much better. So to me, it's everyone's, writing a book, and you have to look at all the experiences. You could be in a really bad place right now. Maybe you suffered, a trauma when you were a child, or maybe you were suffering from, PTSD from serving in the military. And that's only, a portion of your story. And if you can use that and turn it around and say, okay, here's, the beginning portion of my story. And to me, everyone loves a story of the guy who fails, but then, can overcome his failures and can overcome all of his different things. So maybe look at, if you're in a tough place right now, look at it as, man, I'm going to have one hell of a story when the end of this comes out and, I come out on top.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for everything. It's been wonderful to connect with you, and thank you again for sharing your high vibe gifts with our human family.
Thanks, man. And honestly, thank you too for all the work that you're doing. I love, that you're being vulnerable and sharing your story, and, starting, with the book and then the podcast. I think, we need more people like you to bring conversations like this to the forefront.
Thank you so much for those words. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.
This has been Matt Simpson of the Worth the Fight podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can learn more about our mission of hope and healing at worththefightbook.org. Please rate, review, and share this episode. Please help us expand our circle of influence and get these vital conversations out to our human family. Also, if you are in a financial position to support the show, you can help us push forward these conversations with monthly donations on Patreon. This podcast is a tremendous amount of work for me, and I have stellar guests in the queue. Please help if you can. Thank you for listening to this programming. Much love, y'all. Peace.